Welcome to Until All of Us Are Free, a year-long multimedia education project dedicated to Black liberation as collective liberation. I am your host and the creator of this project, Ijoma Oluo. In our last episode on Africa and Black liberation, the topic of consumerism got quite a few mentions as we discussed how our massive, ever-increasing need for tech gadgets is funding war and genocide, and how our fast fashion halls are literally trashing African countries.
So within my lifetime, I have seen myself buy more clothing. I have seen everyone around me buy more clothing. And there was always a part in the back of my brain that said, but where's all this going? The modern fashion industry that we have today is just built on layers and layers of exploitation.
When we talk about liberation and justice, capitalism and consumerism will come up a lot, or at least it should. We live in a hyper capitalist country, one of the most powerful in the world. Billions of people around the world are violently impacted by the insatiable appetites of the capitalist imperialism of the global north. Our participation in that capitalism as residents of these powerful countries is participation in violence. I'm not saying this to make you feel bad, even as I know that it often makes me feel bad as a consumer. I'm saying this because our system doesn't work without our labor and our consumerism. There is immense power in that fact, power that we often don't realize because of how we are coerced and gaslit by our capitalist systems. We are locked into exploitative capitalist systems and conditioned to try to spend our way out of the problems that capitalism itself creates.
I think a lot of us are dealing with a lot of lack in our society. And this is something I talk about in Consumed. As we see more social safety nets erode, more systems erode, there is a part of us that leans so deeply into consumerism because the things which I think are frankly human rights are being stripped away from us as we speak. First of all, I think healthcare is absolutely a human right. Well,
Yeah.
the US has never really properly had that. I think housing is a human right. People can't afford houses. I think good food, access to food. I think good public transportation, a life where you have a little bit of a holiday and you don't work at like a breakneck pace and capitalism isn't breaking you every day. All of these things, in my opinion, are human rights that we are losing. And I think as we lose these things, we just lean more into consumerism because
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I can't buy a house or start a family and I can't seem to keep work, but you know what? I can buy a $5 dress.
We are overworked and overwhelmed. I think the emotional overwhelm is more than anything, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, the real thing is like, what it does this stand in for? Why does, when pre 2020, we weren't ordering food delivery every day. Now, why does it feel so awful to not order it every day? Pre
Yeah.
makeup YouTube, we weren't buying a makeup palette every month. Why does it feel so weird to skip out on this now? And it's not because we suddenly became more greedy. It's meeting a need, and that need is being created. I think
Yeah.
capitalism is deeply creating that need in us.
We've turned even the search for happiness, I think, into consumerism.
Mhm.
I'm just like, I'm beginning at this point in my life, I'm debating the idea of happiness as this. I'm like, is this another one of those like capitalist illusions
Mhm.
that I'm being fed that I'm supposed to continuously fix myself because I'm the problem until I find this magical happiness? What the hell does that
Mhm.
even look like? What is it? What is that
Right.
thing? And I'm just like, when was the last time we even thought about contentment? Just, feeling good, like in the
Right.
moment and not about joy as like I don't know, as this outside thing coming in.
I think a lot of us who are in these consumerist cycles really have to sit with ourselves and think very deeply about what emotions do we go through when we buy things and where does this stem from?
Mhm.
Are we buying because of need? Are we buying because of want? Are we buying because of lack? Are we buying because of previous childhood traumas? Where is this coming from? And I think the more we do that, the more we really get on board with looking at these systems and going, no, thank you.
But what can we actually do about this? Yes, many of us can agree that consumerism is bad, but we can't pretend like we don't live in a capitalist society, like we don't have bills that need to be paid, like we don't have to pay money often to get the goods that we need. We can't just snap our fingers and be free from capitalist exploitation. This is very long term work. We need to look at this problem and all issues of collective liberation on multiple levels, all of which keep our ultimate goals in mind. The truth is that our capitalist systems are fundamentally incompatible with liberation. All capitalism that we see today is racialized capitalism. And in order to be free from racial oppression, ableism, classism, and basically all systemic oppression, we must address the vital role that capitalism plays in all of it. We must free ourselves from the grip of capitalism, and we must structure our long term liberation plans with that in mind. But right now, while we do that long term work, we also must try to make better choices in our consumption that can change our relationship with consumerism and capitalism and reduce its grip on us. We must make choices that reduce the harm of these capitalist systems. This is harm reduction that strengthens our ability to do the very hard and necessary long term work of dismantling systemic oppression, provided that we keep these long term goals in mind and don't treat these harm reduction efforts as the ultimate goal. All of this is to say, we can't spend our way to liberation, but how we spend can save lives and make that liberated future more possible.
I think sometimes we aren't as focused as we should be on the things that might take a little bit more work. Like people can figure out how to buy clothing from drop ship stores in China, but if you're like, "Hey, find an ethical brand," there is sometimes some weaponized incompetence that people lean into because we are so used to the systems of this is just presented to you like this, and then it gets mailed to your house, and it wasn't even made to fit your body. It's just like sized up from like a size 8 mannequin, and
Mhm,
it'll be here in 2 days, you know? I think there's a lot of resistance to stray from that system, like, "Oh,
mhm,
I can't do things that way." One of the things
mhm,
that I see now for a lot of ethical and slow fashion designers is that they're offering patterns now. So even
mhm,
if you're like, "I can't afford that item, but I really like what this person does," you can buy the pattern. Okay, you've got a friend who sews, right? And you can't sew. Your friend has a kid. Your friend wants to go out more often. I'll tell you
mhm,
what, I will babysit for you for,
mhm.
3 nights a week for 2 weeks. What's the going rate for babysitting if you make me these trousers?
Right.
I feel like we're not getting creative in how we look at these
Yeah.
systems because fast fashion has made us feel this weird dependency.
I think part of the infrastructure we have to remember is like the core need behind consumerism. One is to just make capitalism seem more bearable. Okay, so how else do we make capitalism? Like, how about do we make this time more bearable? Whether it means that we're fighting for people to give them more freedom, more time with each other,
Yeah.
connecting, reaching out. Or, if you're like, oh, I love new clothing, okay, let's talk about then how we make the clothing we have seem new, how you
Seem
can
new,
wake
feel
up
new.
and
Yeah.
feel better and have that rush.
I feel like there's something about our society that's edging us more towards being consumers and not being able to
Yep.
do a lot of things, not being able to sew a button back on or repair a sock or something like that, where in the past, everyone knew how to do that.
It's not just about what we buy, it's about how we treat what we buy. Capitalism, especially in the world of stocks and shareholders, requires ever increasing profits. That requires that capitalism has as many people buying as many items as possible, and that the individual profit from each item increases over time. It is not enough for a company to simply make money. Any company promising returns to investors and shareholders must continuously increase those profits in order to be successful. In order for these items to be as widely obtainable to customers as possible, the profit per item must increase, while the amount paid to produce the item decreases. We are conditioned in this overworked world that devalues genuine rest and human connection to believe that we need frivolous little things to be happy, and to justify those purchases when for most of us, the money we spend on those items represents our own wages and labor. The items must be not only affordable, but cheap. But the price we pay in dollars has little to do with the cost to the environment, and the real human cost to produce these items. Factory work with toxic chemicals, dangerous machinery, or 14-hour shifts with no breaks doesn't become less toxic, dangerous, or exploitative with the reduction of the purchase price. In fact, it usually becomes more so. The real, often gruesome cost of consumerism must always be paid, and racialized capitalism has decided that the cost will be paid by workers in the global south and their communities. I don't know about you, but I don't want to say, see this shirt? It only cost me $10 and also 6 hours of drastically underpaid hard labor in dangerous conditions, 30 gallons of wasted water, and the future degradation of land and water in the global south. Few people would. Racialized capitalism gets around this by erasing evidence of the true cost of items where it can, and using racism and classism to drastically reduce the perceived value of the labor involved, and by extension, the value of the workers, as well as the value of the communities and environments harmed when they can't hide it. Racialized capitalism requires that we drastically undervalue the true cost of the items we buy so that we can buy them, trash them, and buy them again. So it is important that we work to witness, understand, and respect the true cost of the items we own.
I feel like there's a lot of morality questioning of it. Like, oh, does this mean I need to sell my Tesla right now? Does this mean that I can not have these AirPods? And I think for me, I would say stop buying new things. Like you can keep the things you have. And I think those companies have done a really good job of making us reliant on those materials as well. But I think we just have to demand for more modular technology, which is like when we can replace the specific part that's broken and not have to throw out the whole thing.
Right. The thing I always want people to remember, and especially when we're talking about something like an iPhone, is if you have the thing, like literal blood went into making it. And so throwing it away is not the answer. You don't throw away the thing that took so many human resources, but you treat it like it took those sorts of resources. You
Right.
treat it like it's not frivolous to just replace it. You don't just replace a human. You care for it, you get every bit of use out of it possible, and you try to extend it. And, then when you make your next choice, advocate for options that hurt less, that harm less.
I think when you are getting to that point where you're really sort of over consumerism and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to have to do something, there is that immediate thought that well, who will I be if I'm not shopping at H&M once a month? And I'm so embarrassed to say, yes, that was the immediate feeling. And the truth of the matter is, when I began to really come off that train, it felt weird at first, and then it started to feel good. And I felt like my brain was slowly returning to something where it was like, who will I be? I'll be someone who goes to more art galleries, and someone who reads more books, and someone who spends their time online looking at more graphic design and less at $20 dresses.
Right.
I'll be someone who is a little bit more well-rounded and someone who gardens more. And so I really think that shopping is taking the place of us being well-rounded individuals with things like hobbies.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of Until All of Us Are Free and our discussion on consumerism and collective liberation. If you missed our last episode or any of the previous episodes, please be sure to go to untilwearefree.com, where you can see all of the past episodes, along with the really valuable episode guides that I make for almost every episode. That's also where you can become a paid subscriber to really support this project that is currently completely self and subscriber funded. It is always my goal to make this project as accessible as possible, and it is with your support that I'm able to do so while creating the best quality content that I can. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you in a future episode.